Okay. So, I took the last few days off streaming, kind of unwillingly, considering the cold weather knocked out the power in my area. And while I was, trying not to freeze and enjoying the snow, the first snow of the whole winter this year since I moved to Seattle, and the seventh time I've ever seen snow in my life, by the way, a kind of little itsy-bitsy conflict started involving the U.S. You see, I got onto my computer when my power came back on the other night, and I find out that the U.S. had airstriked Yemen. She's like, oh, that's cool. I didn't have power, and my power comes back, and I see that the U.S. airstriked Yemen. So I go to stream to talk about it, and then my internet goes out because the power went out around my area, which knocked out the internet services. And so I couldn't stream yesterday. And so we're finally here today, and I can finally talk about all this. And I'm honestly a little bit grateful that I have to talk about this a little bit later than everybody else has, because with time, I'm able to sort of sit back and look at all of the information and all of like the commentary and all everyone's takes as they go, and sort of have a more well-rounded opinion on things when I make my video about it, I don't like covering breaking news as it happens because, frankly, there's just not a lot of information to talk about in the first place. And I find speculation fun, but it's also somewhat irresponsible, and I try not to do too much of it. So I try to wait until there's actually information to talk about with these issues before I get to them. So I'm a little grateful that now is when I'm getting to this topic. You see, I'm going to give you an extremely Cliff Notes version of the backstory to this conflict, and then we're going to get on to the article here, okay? So, correct me if I'm wrong on anything here, because I've just read a couple articles on this, and, I may get, like, one or two things wrong, I might misquote one or two things, and I might miss some important details, I might forget to mention them, so go ahead and drop them if I do, right? You guys are like my backup, okay? If I get anything wrong, you guys have to tell me live so I can correct it. Anyway, so, the Red Sea. If you've ever played a strategy game that involves, like, the full planet and, like, an accurate recreation of Earth and its nations, then you probably know that it's pretty important for global shipping. It matters a lot. And the U.S. has a pretty vested interest in global shipping, as we all know, because if the U.S. were to go belly up, like, tonight, then by tomorrow morning, the entire global economy would be up in flames. That kind of gives you just a little bit of perspective on how big the U.S., like, how big a deal the U.S. is for, like, the global economy. And global shipping is, like, the most important form of global economy trade there is, right? Like, obviously, we all know that last year when that ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, it kind of... Or not the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about different side of the fucking world, and so I had the Suez Canal in mind, but other side of the world. We're talking about South America now. Remember when the Panama Canal got, like, blocked up by that ship? Had a little bit of a constipation, a little bit of a blockage. Yeah, different canals. Little bit of a blockage happened in the Panama Canal, and, had it become a bit of a meme, became a little bit of a meme, and people kind of blocked up a lot of trade because, the only other way to get past the Americas is to go all the way down south around it. And so, like, not being able to get through there was a bit of a problem because, holy shit, now there's a wall of the Americas as tall as the world in our way to be able to get to the Pacific. A bit of an issue, bit of a problem. We're gonna have to turn around and go back over the Atlantic. It was a big problem, right? Global shipping and it getting fucked with ends up being really big news because everybody suffers from it. We actually saw prices go up on tons of products because of the shipping lane getting clogged up. Well, the Red Sea isn't quite as important as the Panama Canal necessarily, but it's pretty up there as far as importance to global shipping. And there's a lot of nations that send civilian shipping boats through the Red Sea. And, well, now they've started getting kind of airstriked lately. They started getting bombed. They started getting airstriked. in the last couple months by a group called the Houthis. They're backed by Iran, and they're sort of a pirate rebel group that they're based in Yemen, at least the ones that are attacking the ships, and they claim to be against Israel's genocide of the Palestinians. The problem is they're just extremely anti-Semitic. Everything about their group is just anti-Semitism. Their leaders go on anti-Semitic rants. Their iconography is just blatantly anti-Semitic. They just hate Jews. They're literally just an anti-Semitic Islamist radical group. And what they're trying to do is exert political power and use the plight of the Palestinians as an excuse to do so. So the Houthis, they're claiming they're blocking off the Red Sea and not allowing any ships for shipping to get through because they do not want to allow the U.S. to get away with the support for Israel, the U.S. and the U.K. and other nations to get away with their support of Israel because Israel is doing a genocide on the Palestinians, right? But they do nothing to help the Palestinians. They are explicitly anti-Semitic. It's very clear that they are just virtue signaling, right? So, these rebels are a problem, right? The U.S. is in a lot of treaties. We are in a lot of agreements with other countries that also have a vested interest in this global shipping, and we're kind of considered the biggest boy in the room in that respect with our military because we've got, like, the largest military in the world. We have more people in reserves alone than any other military in the world. We have the highest military spending by a lot, like, to the point where second place, China, is, like, we spend twice as much as second place, you know? Like, we are the big boy in the room, militarily speaking, when it comes to every single alliance that we have. So, when nations we're allied with are having their ships, their civilian trade ships, bombed by militant rebels, we can't just ignore that. Especially when it's now been months of them trying to put a blockade up on the Red Sea. We can't just ignore that any longer. So Biden invoked, I believe it's the War Powers Act, completely legally from what I can tell, and ordered an airstrike on what I believe was a Houthi rebel satellite site in Yemen. I may be wrong about what the first target was, but I believe it was a satellite site. I think it was a site they were using to do recon, right? Anybody who knows exactly what the first target was can correct me here, but from what I read, I remember reading that the first target was a satellite site. Uh-oh, Hassan is going to beef with you now? Dog, I beefed with Hassan on every single one of these, like, global conflict issues. Hassan is, if there's anything I know about Hassan, it's that it's impossible for him to have a good take on anything related to foreign policy, okay? The dude was against the Ukrainians until it stopped being, like, acceptable to be against the Ukrainians, you know, because he's pro-Russia. He's pro-Hamas. He's literally just anything that's anti-America or claims they're anti-America, and Hassan will support, and the more terrorists they are, the more edgy it seems to him to support them, and so he'll do it and be like, aren't you triggered that I support Hamas or whatever? Yeah, he's very cringe. He's very cringe. Like, Hassan is basically, like, the lefty Groyper. The lefty Nick Fuentes is, I think, a good way to put it. For real, he had such a bad take on this? Well, before we get to Hassan's stupidity, I'm going to summarize everything that I know. Correct me if I'm wrong on anything here, of course. And then we're going to go ahead and read a Reuters report on this. And then we'll get to what Hassan said. Oh, by the way, does anyone have a link to the dumb shit Hassan said about this? Just to have a link ready for whenever we finish this up would be nice. I want to see what stupid-ass shit Hassan said, because I know much of the left has been immediately jumping to attack Biden for this, despite what he did being completely legal, and, like, the only thing that was an option. Like, I get that a lot of lefties are opposed to the idea of the U.S. reaching out and fighting very faraway nations on faraway lands because it doesn't feel defensive in any way, right? Like, it doesn't really seem like the US having military bases overseas and fighting and airstriking places overseas does much to actually protect us here in America across the ocean, right? It doesn't really feel that way. It feels more like the US government just wants to use the military to invoke their power and their will across the ocean and around the world. And granted, that is true in a lot of cases. That is part of it. A lot of it is also the fact that there are things that America needs to protect to keep the nation functional and running on a fundamental level that don't exist within America's borders. National shipping lanes is an example of one of these things. Protecting national shipping is paramount for America. If national shipping just shut down entirely, the country would fall into turmoil. It would be an apocalyptic event. It would be like Mad Max, okay? I get that it's unattractive for Biden or the U.S. government to order a strike on any other nation. It feels like the kind of thing you should oppose just principally. But when you look at the facts, when you look at the practicality, when you look at the way that a functioning world system works, this is the only option that could be taken. A small group of rebels, is using their military technology to fuck up civilian cargo vessels, to fuck up world trade, to strong-arm the U.S. into doing what they want. Or doing what they claim they want. So, yeah. The U.S. kind of has no option but to step up. And it's not even just the U.S. Britain has also airstriked Yemen and the Houthi bases there. So, I'm going to go ahead and bring up this Reuters clip because it kind of goes over the way that the Houthis plan to respond to Biden ordering that strike and numerous more that have followed from the USA and from Britain on Houthi bases in Yemen. So here's Biden's response, and then we're going to get into what the Houthi rebels' response is to the strike.
I think they are.
The Houthi movement threatened a strong and effective response on Saturday after the United States carried out another strike in Yemen overnight. It further heightens tensions after Washington vowed to protect shipping lanes from attacks by the Iran-aligned group. The US said its latest strike hit a radar site, a day after dozens of American and British strikes on Houthi facilities in Yemen.
I will say, the balls on these guys to say that they're going to retaliate, like, massively against the US, like, while standing in the middle of an open field in a tent. We've got decades-old technology that could have just vaporized everybody standing there in that photo before they would have heard the plane coming. The sonic boom would have come after they were all blown up. Can we bring up that picture of all the... Yeah. We've got, like, 30-year-old jets that are so quiet when they're coming, that, like, these guys would just all be blown up, and there would be no indication that the jet was coming until after it flew over, and by then everyone would be gone. That's 30-year-old tech that we have. That's not even talking about modern-day drone technology, okay? The U.S. military could wage war against God and win. Okay? It's not even a joke, all right? I kind of have to say, I somewhat respect the balls on these guys to say, after getting their sights repeatedly striked by the U.S. and Britain, their response is, we're going to retaliate. There will be swift retaliation from us while standing in such a position that U.S. technology could just wipe them out in like 10 seconds. Oh, Zan, we bombed the shit out of God in the 60s? I guess that's where he went.
Effective response on Saturday after the United States carried out another strike in Yemen overnight. It further heightens tensions after Washington vowed to protect shipping lanes from attacks by the Iran-aligned group. The U.S.
Dog, you just did... That's like the most American thing ever, blowing up an American flag. You understand that what you just did is protected by the First Amendment, right? Like, flag burning or destroying the American flag is one of the most clear, Like, one of the most... I believe that burning or destroying the American flag, and I argue this with conservatives, is possibly the most American thing you can do. Because you're using the American freedom of speech that you have, your First Amendment rights, to protest the country that you exist in, something that's not legal in many, many countries. Like, there are a lot of places people live where you're just not allowed to do something like that. You're not allowed to burn your nation's flag. Like, it's against the law in many countries. We're very lucky to have that right. It's kind of what makes America so fucking awesome. Like, it's so important. They made it the First Amendment. They were like, we want people to see this as the first selling point for this country, is you can say whatever the fuck you want. You can even shit talk the country and the government. We won't come after you.
Protect shipping lanes from attacks by the Iran-aligned group.
Pro-American
The US said its latest strike
Houthis,
hit
damn.
a radar site a day after dozens of American and British strikes.
Oh, sorry, it wasn't a satellite site. It was a radar site. My bad. Whenever I said before that strike was on a satellite site, it was radar site. I don't know why, but I remembered the word... when I read the article before, I remembered the word radar as satellite for some reason. I don't know why my brain scrambled those up. My bad. Correction. Lefty misinfo corrected.
On Houthi facilities in Yemen. A Houthi spokesperson told Reuters the strikes had no significant impact on the group's ability to prevent Israel-affiliated ships from passing through the Red Sea, though the Pentagon said the US-British strikes had, quote, good effects.
Yeah, the Houthis are probably going to claim that, like, this has had no effect on them, these strikes. It absolutely has. As far as... Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. I have to show you really quick because this video reminded me. This is called a CRAM, right? That's what these things are called? These, like, massive fucking mounted guns. This is a CRAM. Is that the name of it? It's something like that. Any military weapons buffs in chat know if I'm correct about the name of this thing? These are super cool. They're laser-guided, like, literally vaporize anything that's in the air that it shoots at in, like, 20 seconds guns. Yeah, these things are so fucking cool. The thing is... whenever there's a new conflict, as you all know, Twitter becomes awash with misinformation, as always. And I fucking love this. The other day, I saw this video come up on my timeline claiming breaking Houthi anti-air capabilities seen destroying the first American F-15 of the war over Sana'a, Yemen. So you watch the video... And I recognized what was fishy about it instantly because of the lighting. It was very familiar to me. But tell me when you figure out what's fishy about this video. If you haven't figured it out yet, this is Arma 3. People are posting clips of Arma 3 and claiming it's real war footage on Twitter, as usual. Arma 3 is admittedly a pretty damn good milsim. Damn. But yeah, that gun that's shooting there is, the one that's like shooting super fast, like a laser beam, is, it's one of these. It's one of these doing that in the Arma footage. That's why they used one of those guns for the footage.
British strikes had, quote, good effects. The strikes have added to concerns about the escalation of the conflict that has spread through the region since the Palestinian militant group Hamas and Israel went to war.
Look how fast that
Iran's
shoots.
allies also entered the fray from Lebanon, Syria and Iraq. The Houthis' Al Jazeera TV showed hundreds of thousands of people rallied in the Yemeni capital Sana'a, chanting slogans denouncing Israel and the United States on Friday. Residents of Yemen remain defiant in the face of further strikes. We will...
It's unfortunate because Israel is absolutely deserving in criticism, but when now we're going to see other nations in this part of the world, like, use the fact that there is this sort of, like... There's this sort of unanimous opinion that the U.S. is kind of sticking their fingers where they don't belong, all throughout the Middle East. That sort of... It's very pervasive. And in some places, it's less popular than others, right? Like, in a lot of areas, like, for example, if you ask, like, a lefty, they would tell you that everywhere in the Middle East hates the U.S. and that, like, they think the U.S. is bad and everything. It's, of course, not the fucking case, particularly, like, I think, I'm trying to remember the name right now. Why am I blanking right now? I know that in Iran, ironically enough, despite the fact that the Houthis are backed by Iran, in Iran, much of the civilians in Iran pretty pro-America. They actually like America quite a bit. And you're also right about Afghanistan war penguin. Most Afghan civilians, particularly in Kabul, very much supportive of the U.S. staying there until like very, very particular like demands had been met with peace talks with the Taliban, which were never met, and the Taliban just came in and didn't, they did the things that the people there didn't want anyway. But through a lot of the Middle East, the fact that the U.S. is, not exactly the most moral with the way that they conduct their military operations has led to a pretty broad common belief that the U.S. sticks their fingers where they don't belong and is a violent, militant, sort of authoritarian, fascist, whatever regime, that it backs puppet governments that, inflict the same types of violence on others. And they use this sort of false virtue signaling to rouse the population to supporting like their own national grabs for power and influence, using the virtue signal of the plight of the Palestinians. It's not like like the Houthis aren't the first to do this. Like Yemen is not the first nation to use this kind of rhetoric like to bolster themselves and their own best interests. Like while virtue signaling for another group that's being victimized by U.S. imperialism. It's not the first. Like, not even the first within the conflict with Israel and Hamas in the last, year.
Fight with Gaza. We will stand. Our position is clear for the US and for Britain. We don't care if our stance will lead to problems, says this man. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen on Saturday urged maximum restraint by all.
Also, unfortunately, anti-Semitism is rampant in Yemen. It really, really is. Yemen has really, really big issues with anti-Semitism. And obviously, the Houthi rebel group is a very, very extreme version of that. Extremely anti-Semitic. Obviously, they've sort of personified Israel as their boogeyman to chase. Their group. The group of Jews they want to attack right now is Israel. That is the personification they have made, the mascot for Jewish people they have made, and that they're focusing on right now. But all of their rhetoric is broadly anti-Semitic. They're not anti-Zionist, they're anti-Semitic. There is a difference, a very important difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And it is anti-Semitism that runs rampant through much of Yemen, and obviously is one of the core foundations of the Houthi rebel groups that are blocking the Red Sea.
All involved in Yemen, and warned of an increasingly precarious situation in the region. The Red Sea crisis added to the spread of conflict through the Middle East since Hamas militants rampaged through southern Israel on October 7th, killing 1,200 people and seizing 240 hostages. Israel has responded by laying waste to large sections.
Okay. Why this is overdoing it. Do we put US flags on the sides of our armored vehicles like this? This feels like it's a little over the top, Israel. Come on.
Of Gaza to try to annihilate Hamas. The Gaza Health Ministry said in a statement on Saturday a total of 23,843 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes on the enclave.
That is true. We do that. That is true. Fuck. Yeah. Well, funnily enough, the Houthis are promising swift retaliation, and I think they're probably going to get retaliated against way harder before they can do any retaliation of their own. This really does seem like it's going to be a fairly one-sided conflict, especially because we're not even putting boots on the ground. There's no boots on the there's no American boots on the ground in this conflict. It's all airstrikes and long-range attacks. We're unlikely to lose a single American troop in all of this. So it's interesting that the Houthis are talking such a big game because they're going to, like, this is not even close to a fair fight for them. It's actually a little bit funny. Xanderhall, I found a few clips of Hassan clips, but I'm not sure if they will be helpful. Let me look it up. I'll look on Twitter. Hassan. Let's see. Jesus Christ, so many Hassan fan accounts posting like GIFs about how Hassan isn't live and they don't know what to do. Jesus Christ. Okay. Here's a good list of horrible things that Hassan has supported as far as foreign policy. Hassan supported the Chinese invasion and occupation of Tibet. I forgot about all that. As well as the potential invasion and occupation of Taiwan. I forgot about that too. He also supported the Russian invasion and annexation of Crimea and Ukraine. And yeah, he's also like very adjacent to supportive of Hamas as well. Yeah, Hassan just fucking sucks. Hassan just sort of blows, dude. I found a few Hassan... Okay, here they... I've not watched any of these, but this is what I was able to find. The longest one is 23 minutes. Hassan a month ago. Hassan yesterday. We'll watch the yesterday one, because that's probably going to be the most... The U.S. may be aiding war crimes in Yemen. Hassan reacts to Vox. Jesus Christ.
Perspective shifted, and now you think anybody that criticizes American foreign policy is just simply saying America bad with nothing else to back it up with.
Hey Hassan, what did you have to back up that JDAM comment? I'm curious, because like Hassan's whole issue when it comes to this is that Hassan does not back up any of the claims he makes about foreign policy. He claims this or that is a war crime, this or that group is doing war crimes, this or that group is evil or in the wrong, or that this group bombed that group. No evidence to back it up. He just speculates live on air, ends up dying on the hill of defending a speculation that ends up being dead fucking wrong because he never has any evidence for it. Because no matter what, he always has to argue that America bad, and if the evidence doesn't line up to say America is bad, and that if there's any gray area there, he has to fill in the gaps. Hassan is a victim of severe audience capture, I think. Do you guys know what audience capture is? I talk about it a fair amount, but I haven't really defined it. It's when a content creator or public figure becomes really reliant on an audience, right? Like, for example, I financially rely on you guys liking me to some extent, right? Like, if you guys didn't like me, you would unsub, you wouldn't support me, and I wouldn't be able to do YouTube for a living. Which means, to an extent, I have some level of motivation to avoid saying or doing things, regardless of how authentically I may feel about them, that could push you guys away. That is some level of audience capture, right? Like, the idea that, like, your audience does kind of determine what you're willing or able to say or do. And I feel like I avoid it quite well. I literally mass ban and purge people from my community all the time. I don't feel like I succumb to audience capture. I get a lot of shit from my own fans for having based-ass takes, and I just ban them when they get angry, you know? Hassan, on the other hand, well, he does have a tendency to ban people, don't get me wrong. He knows that the most dedicated part of his fan base are the tankies. I don't know if Hassan is truly, fundamentally, as, like, radically anti-American and tanky as he claims to be or makes himself out to be publicly. What I do know is his audience is very militantly tanky-leaning, and if Hassan went against his audience at this point, it would be the end for him. And I think he knows that. I think Hassan knows that at this point, his audience expects him to have these takes, and if he doesn't, it's going to be a problem for him. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just explaining why I think somebody who I don't think is stupid. I think Hassan's a bit, like, dumb, but I don't think he's stupid. How someone who I don't think is stupid or really evil can arrive to these positions time and time again. I had to pick up my Ritalin. Prescribers can't write their own prescriptions and can treat themselves. Can't treat themselves? Oh, I'm sorry to Lancer. Anyway. Let's check it out. I'm curious about what bad takes Hassan has here.
Who became
This isn't meant to be like an anti-Hassan video. I'm just curious to see what like the general left-wing dumb fuck perspective is on this issue.
Less intellectually curious.
Whoa!
Here is a Vox video about how the U.S. may be aiding war crimes in Yemen. Maybe.
One of the Middle East's bloodiest conflicts is also one of its most overlooked. It's not Syria or Iraq. It's in a different place entirely. Yemen.
I can't go to Yemen. I'm an
The 20-month-old
analyst.
civil war there has killed more than 10,000 people and triggered a massive humanitarian crisis. But press coverage has been minimal, overshadowed by the fight against ISIS in Syria and in Iraq. In Yemen, one side has Houthi rebels, backed by Iran.
This is from 2016, by the way. The U.S. is helping Saudi Arabia bomb Yemen, and it's a disaster. Is this a Johnny Harris video? I mean, he was back then. He was there. Is there TOS in this?
On the other, you have the former Yemeni
I gotta
government
pee.
of Abdurabu Mansour al-Hadi, backed by a coalition of 10 countries, led by neighboring Saudi Arabia, who is ultimately also backed by the U.S.
Okay, dude. Okay. All right. Yep. All right. Yep. That's the lefty perspective on this. There you go. There it is, dude. That's the lefty perspective on this issue. There it is. Fucking hell, dude. Like, just click random Hassan video about the issue. Puts on video. This is a segment. This is a actual... Could you imagine if I did a segment where I just put a video on where I'm supposed to be reacting to it and just got up and took a shit for like 10 minutes, came back, asked what I miss, watched the last 5 minutes, and uploaded that on YouTube, and people fucking watch... How many views does this have? How many views does this have? 28,000 views in a day. Absolutely pitiful, dude. I didn't mean to turn this into a Hassan hate segment, but I mean, come on, dude. That's beyond parody.